Common Council. During the public health crisis, we will be conducting our meetings remotely, and they will be available and streamed live on the city's Facebook page, which actually is having some difficulties right now, but also on the broadcast live by the Community Media Center, as well as on their Facebook page and YouTube page. We'll begin as we do every meeting with the pledge to the flag, followed by a moment of silence. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
justice for all.
Thank you. Copies of tonight's agenda are available online, as well as the entire information packet that the council will be using. Just please visit the city's website to find that. First on the agenda is consideration of the approval of the minutes of the last couple of meetings. We have a meeting minutes from the special mayor and council meeting of June 3rd, the mayor and common council meeting of June 8th, and the closed meeting of June 8th. May I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve all three sets, Mr. President.
I'll second.
There's a motion from Mr. Cavacci to approve all the minutes, and a second from Ms. Thomas. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. We have one item on the agenda for presentations tonight, and that is a mayoral proclamation. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, so we have a proclamation for Park and Recreation Month, July 2020. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the city of Westminster, Maryland, and our parks and recreation programs are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of community and region. And parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And parks and recreation programs increase the community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community. And parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. Whereas the U.S. House of Representatives have designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the city of Westminster, Maryland recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, I, Joe Dominic, Mayor of the City of Westminster, in conjunction with the Common Council, do hereby proclaim July as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Westminster, Maryland, adopted the 6th day of June 2020. But it's a little late. It was adopted on the 6th day of June. We'll adopt it today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will move on now to the consent calendar. We have 3 items on the consent calendar this evening. May I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
There's been a motion from Mr. Dehoff and a second from Mr. Cavacci. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it and the ayes have it, and the consent calendar is approved. Now, the report from the mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. So just a couple things here I wanted to touch on. I've been keeping everyone updated. We made some more progress with the website. We got our the color scheme and mood board picked out. We have some good images, and we have the layout in the industry We have like industry layout basically of how the website's going to look, and I'll send that out to everybody so you can look at it. Just make sure you use your imagination. It's what in the industry we call a wireframe, so it looks nothing like the website's going to look, but it enables us to move things around easily without having to deal with design problems in the process. So I'll send it out. Things are looking good for that. I'm excited to get that going. I think it's going to be a huge upgrade. Now to talk about some a little more serious stuff. I want to, we discussed the last meeting, the opening plan for the city, and we have a preliminary plan. I want to run it by everybody and just make sure everyone has time to think it over, and get back to me with any issues. But I think it's time to announce it, and it's pretty, we want it to be as close to normal as possible. So I think we're achieving that while also maximizing and keeping safety in mind for our staff and our residents. But the overarching principles are the appropriate PPE and common space, disinfection and sanitation is important. We want to note that we're encountering availability and pricing issues regarding PPE and sanitation, so that will be a little bit of a hurdle, but that's just something of note. We're going to enforce or promote the adherence to the 6-foot physical distancing guidelines. Virtual meetings should be held in lieu of in-person meetings when feasible to do so. Productive teleworking arrangements should be continued to limit number of on-site staff. But that's just in general. Now I have a little breakdown by department and kind of what we're doing, because it's going to be vastly different, by each department. Recreation facilities, the outdoor recreation facilities open at this point. They're going to be open with only 2 exceptions. The bathroom facilities at City Park are still closed, and the community room rentals are not being accepted. So there's no status change recommended at this time. The fitness center open today, 50% capacity. So that's down from state mandate. So maybe we'll get a report on that tonight, or maybe not. I know Ms. Gruber's not here tonight. The police department, the command staff, they're working staggered schedules, in part to minimize the number of personnel in headquarters at any one time. Patrol bureaus continuing modified personal contact efforts, the telephone reporting, et cetera. Criminal Investigations Bureau, they're split into 2 shifts to minimize the number of personnel in headquarters at any one time. Continued use of teleworking where feasible, and the lobbies to remain closed to the public at the time. Recreation and Parks as a department, benefited staffs now working on site, relocated the Babylon building both for physical distancing reasons and to free up space for holding fitness classes. The Streets Department proposed resumption of normal staffing operations as of Monday, June 29th, so a week from today. And 2 teams would work out of separate parts of the building to minimize unnecessary employee exposure. They're going to be reporting to work. The report to work times are going to be between teams offset by 1 hour to further minimize exposure. And to the extent possible, only 1 employee per truck. They are going to have staggered lunch breaks as well. Utility maintenance, it's proposed resumption of normal staffing operations on Monday, June 29th, a week from today. 1 team would work out of utility maintenance facility, while the other team would work out of 1725 West Main to minimize unnecessary employee exposure. To the extent possible, only 1 employee per truck there as well, and staggered lunch breaks. The water plant, we are proposing a resumption of normal staffing operations on Monday, July 13th. We have a longer time frame for this, given the criticality of service delivery and rising number of cases. So we want to make sure that that's mission critical. We're going to be extra safe with that. To the extent possible, no more than 1 employee per truck again, and staggered lunch break times as well. Wastewater is exactly the same as the water plant, same protocol there. And then 56 West Main, we're giving deference to each department director to determine the plan for their staff, since they know individual staff circumstances and how their department runs. But productive teleworking arrangements are going to be continued where feasible to limit number of staff in the building. We're exploring installation of plexiglass barriers for cubicle space arrangement, and the city offices are going to remain closed to the public. I will shoot an email of this out to everybody here in a little while as well to look over. Obviously, the proposed plan is a week from today, so we have a couple of days to discuss here. So that is it for my my report, Mr. President. That's all I have.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And do we want to move into the COVID report from there? I'm not sure there's anything to add. Ms. Matthews, is there?
Yes, I had just two items, President Pecoraro, that I'd like to just share with the Mayor and Common Council. Chief Ledwell reported to me that we are continuing, thankfully, to have minimal issues regarding executive order violations. And also, as Mayor Dominic mentioned, the Westminster Family Fitness Center reopened today with restricted capacity as required by the governor's executive order. Late this afternoon, I touched base with Assistant Director of Recreation and Parks, Heather Mullendor, to see how things were going. She informed me that things have gone fairly smoothly today. As of 4:30 p.m., we had 47 facilities. Ms. Mullendor reported that our customers have been very patient and respectful of our new operating procedures, which we certainly appreciate. She also shared that the department is receiving quite a few phone calls for reservations for group fitness classes and childcare, as those reservations can be made 48 hours in advance. So that's all I had regarding our pandemic response.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. I just want to mention, I might as well do it here, that I took the opportunity to walk by the fitness center this afternoon and take a look. And I was greeted outside by a staff member who took my temperature and made sure that I used hand sanitizer before I went in. I walked inside and looked around. The machines have been spaced out. Looked pretty good to me. And I was very impressed with how seriously everybody was taking things in there. So I think that they are off to a good start. I'm very pleased that we were able to reopen under what looked to me like pretty safe conditions. So that's a good thing. Thank you very much. So we'll move on now to reports from standing committees. We'll start with the Arts Council and Mr. Deha.
No report, Mr. President.
All right, thank you very much. Economic and Community Development Committee, Mr. Yingling.
Nothing to report as of now, Mr. President. Thank you.
All right, thank you. For the Finance Committee, I'll say that we did our heavy lift, which was the budget at the last meeting. Thank you all for your support. I think we worked pretty hard on that, not just as a, excuse me, as a Finance Committee, but as the entire elected body with a lot of input this year and with a lot of extra demands on the staff, but we got through it. Thank you all very much for your support. Tonight, later on the agenda, we'll take a look at the audit report and the associated corrective action plan. And I think everybody will be pretty pleased with the steps being taken by staff to address those things. And that's all I'll report for that. Personnel Committee, Ms. Gilbert. I think you're muted.
I had to unmute myself. I apologize. We since our last council meeting, we did have a personnel meeting, but I really have not much to report from that. I believe we'll be doing another follow-up meeting in coordination probably with the Safety Committee, and we'll report out on that later.
All right, very good, thank you. Public Safety, Mr. Cavacci.
Not a whole lot, Mr. President. You know, things are pretty much status quo. We're not really having a lot of issues. You know, some of them demonstrations downtown are still taking place, and everyone's behaving, you know, excellent. No issues there or anywhere else. Frankly, we did have one, I guess, unfortunate casualty due to COVID that I think we all look forward to, which is the promotion and awards ceremony that had to take place, you know, remotely. So none of us were able to attend it. I know I certainly enjoyed going to it, and I think most of you do too as well. Chief, are you on the line with us?
Yes, I am.
Were you going to mention anything in terms of maybe some of the bigger award winners this evening, just to get their names into the record during your report? I don't want to do that if you have that handy.
Sure, I can. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So it'll be nice just to hear who won what. I always like to keep an eye on all of our police officers do a great job, and in particular the ones that are get commendations for things they've done is really, really great. Other than that, Mr. President, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And the Public Works Committee, Mr. Yingling.
Nothing to report, Mr. President.
All right, very good, thank you. And finally, the Recreation and Parks Committee, Mr. Dehoff.
No report.
Thank you. All right, moving that along then. We'll move on now to council comments and discussion. Mr. Cavacci, anything on that from you?
I do. I have one thing, Mr. President. What are we thinking in terms of as far as us getting back together in person for these meetings?
Well, that's a great question, Mr. Cavacci. The mayor and I have had a little conversation about it, but we haven't had a chance to talk with Ms. Matthews about it and start coming up with a plan. But we'll take a note and to get back to everybody at the next meeting, which is going to be a special meeting next week. So we'll be able to report back to everybody next week on what we think we'll be able to do with that.
Great. These are all well and good, but it's just not the same. I don't feel like we're able to just do things as well remotely like we can in person, in my humble opinion.
I agree, and I miss seeing you too, Mr. Cavacci.
That's all.
All right, thank you. Ms. Gilbert.
Yes, I do have something. So way back when we were meeting in person, I talked about the Year of the Woman. It was announced that there would be a multimedia and scholarship contest for the City of Westminster's celebration of the Year of the Woman way back in February of 2020. Soon after that, as everyone you all are aware and everyone watching us is aware, much of our daily lives were overtaken by the coronavirus pandemic. However, the few things that did take place, one of which was the continuation of the scholarship contest. We proceeded with that, and in coordination with the leadership of the Westminster Family Center, many women throughout the community, and some great leaders throughout Westminster, we continue to obtain essays and a lot of great writings from our community and the students in our community. There were wonderfully amazing essays about the women who had made positive influences on our kids' lives throughout Carroll County, actually. People that were brought to the forefront were people like Rosa Parks and Madam C.J. Walker, Tarana Burke, Dr. Dorsey, and the many moms and grandmas that have influenced our lives. However, one of the essays that greatly stood out for those of us who were judging the essays was Caroline Friedel. She is a senior at Francis Scott Key, and she is the winner of the Year of the Woman's essay this year. She is going to be receiving a $500 scholarship, which is funded by the David and Evelyn Bablin Fund at the Community Foundation of Carroll County. And I just wanted to make that announcement and congratulate Caroline. And I'd like to congratulate all of the people who wrote essays for the contest. They were absolutely terrific. And that is all I have, Mr. President.
All right, very good. Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Let's see, who would be next? Mr. Dehoff.
No report.
Mr. England.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. I think I caught everybody. The mayor's already had his chance. Move on now to unfinished business. We have one item of unfinished business on the agenda, and that is the discussion of the fiscal year 2019 audit findings and associated corrective action plan. Ms. Matthews.
Thank you, President Pecoraro. As the mayor and common council undoubtedly recall, on May 7th, Ms. Wanda Lynn of Brown Schultz Sheridan Fritz CPAs presented the FY 2019 financial reports to the Mayor and Common Council. As part of her presentation, Ms. Lynn also noted that there were 8 audit findings. A brief summary of those 8 findings is included in the staff memo as part of your agenda packet, as well as the full audit findings. Those were redistributed to you all with this agenda packet. On May 7th, the Mayor and Common Council agreed to schedule a follow-up discussion of the FY 2019 audit findings and the associated corrective action plan. So tonight's discussion was really scheduled to provide the Mayor and Common Council with an opportunity to discuss the findings and ask any questions of staff that you might have. Before I open it up to any questions or comments, I did want to just comment on one of the findings, which would be finding reference 2019-005, which can be found on numbered page 92 of your agenda packet. This particular finding relates to some issues regarding some city accounts at the Community Foundation of Carroll County. In the action taken, it's noted that all accounts have been closed. I did want to note that we have had some slight difficulties finally closing one of the accounts, which is the one that involves the Westminster Police Department. We have expended all those funds, but because of some last minute adjustments by the foundation on their end, the city found itself with a negative balance. So I have reached out to the Community Foundation to find out how we can resolve that negative balance. It's very nominal. I believe it was roughly less than $100. But that account at this juncture is technically not closed. And I did want to call that to the Mayor and Common Council's attention since we were talking about this matter this evening. So with that, President Pecoraro, I'd like to just open it up to whatever discussion the Mayor and Common Council would like to have. Certain of the findings relate to one department or another. The audit findings and the corrective action plan were redistributed to staff last Tuesday, and all of us are prepared to answer whatever questions you all might have. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Pecoraro.
All right, thank you, Ms. Matthews. I think, rather than just kind of hopscotch around, I think maybe the easiest thing to do would be just to take them briefly one at a time, state what the finding was, and briefly state the city's response to it. Can we do that, please?
We can certainly do that. Would you like for me to walk through those, or for Ms. Palmer to do so?
Do. Yeah, I think that's easier than jumping around and having questions back and forth about might not be in keeping with the same item. So please go ahead.
Okay, Ms. Palmer, please feel free to jump in. The first audit finding concerned prior period adjustments. With your concurrence, Council President Pecoraro, I'll just actually read the audit finding. The auditors recommended that the city, 1, only record receivables criteria for revenue recognition, and 2, amortize deferred outflows related to the change in proportionate share of the net pension liability over the expected remaining service lives of all employees provided pensions through the plan. The action taken, as noted in the corrective action plan, is that the Finance Department will review the June 30th, 2020 balances to ensure all receivables will be recognized in the correct period, and deferred outlays related to the change in proportionate share of the net pension liability will be amortized over the expected remaining service lives of all employees provided pensions through the plan. The Finance Department staff will receive training regarding pensions and amortizations by June 30th, 2020.
All right, very good, thank you. Any questions from Ms. Matthews on that? All right, thank you. Then we'll move on to the next one.
Finding number 2 had to do with fiscal year-end reporting. The auditor's recommendation was that the city review its current internal processes and procedures over financial reporting to ensure that all material transactions are recorded in the city's financial statements and that their balances are materially correct at fiscal year-end and throughout the fiscal year. Finance should work to ensure that the financial reports are as accurate as possible and that any material adjustments are made before providing to the mayor and common council. Staff's response to this audit finding was that staff turnover created weaknesses in year-end reporting. New staff will be trained for year-end reporting by June 30th, 2020.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from Ms. Matthews? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next one. Thank you.
I think I might ask Ms. Palmer to actually maybe summarize finding number 3, which had to do with capital assets. It's quite long, as you all are probably seeing in your agenda packet, and she's probably best positioned to sort of narrow that down.
Sure. Let me get to that. Did you want me to read the finding like you just did, the whole finding?
Yes.
I think since it's so long, Ms. Palmer, I think if you can kind of summarize the essence of the auditor's recommendation, if that's acceptable to you, President Pecoraro.
That'll be fine.
Certainly. So the city has a fixed asset system that is in a separate module of the city's financial suite. Those fixed assets have never reconciled with the city's general ledger that corresponds in the same financial suite. At one point, the city hired an intern to try to make that reconciliation. They were unable to do so. I was under the impression up until this audit that both modules were reconciled and were reconciled and in balance, and they aren't, or they weren't. They are now. I worked with that. We also had a few fixed assets from fiscal year 2018 that were not recorded properly in the fixed asset module. They were only put into the general ledger, which further made the reconciliation unbalanced. And so all of those entries and all of those modules now reconcile, and all of the fixed assets depreciation flows from the city's fixed asset module into the general ledger.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Ms. Matthews, you can move on to the next one.
I'm going to ask Ms. Palmer, actually, if she can go ahead and walk through finding 4 as well, because that's something she worked with quite extensively.
Certainly. As you all know, right at the end of fiscal year 2019, we were finishing up the citywide fiber project. And part of the ending part of that project was that the contractor had a significant amount of leftover inventory. The city purchased some of that inventory from the contractor. In addition to that, it was moved from the contractor's possession into the city's possession. The city, myself, an auditor, and 2 other city staff members who were associated with the fiber project walked through the inventory count. Both myself and the auditor agreed on the counts. The unfortunate part was we couldn't value them on a invoice. What actually happened was we weren't invoiced for as much of the inventory as what we counted. And that was because the contractor, if he had already started the package or the line, he just gave it to us. In addition, if he had parts of inventory that he couldn't use in other jobs, he also gave it to us. So what happened was we undervalued the inventory. And so the auditors couldn't come up with a value because we had never paid for the inventory, and they wanted us to value it at its current market value. So that's what that finding is about. It will be valued correctly on this year's inventory.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Matthews, you move on to unless there's any questions, we will move on to the next one.
Thank you, President Pecoraro. This would be finding reference 2019-005, and this is the finding that relates to the matter I mentioned at the very beginning of my remarks dealing with the Community Foundation of Carroll County. This is the auditor's recommendation. We understand the city has closed or is in the process of closing these accounts subsequent to year end. Our recommendation is to communicate to the Community Foundation that it is the intention of management and the mayor and common council that all activity that relates to the city should flow through the city's internal policies and procedures, and therefore there is no need for future accounts to be created and maintained through the Community Foundation. Any donations received for city activities by the Community Foundation should be forwarded directly to the city. The noted action taken is that accounts have been closed. No new accounts will be set up without specific authorization by the Mayor and Common Council. And as I noted in my remarks, the city's intent had been, we received 2 checks from the Community Foundation, formally closing 2 of the 3 accounts. And as I indicated earlier, the city staff had believed that we had expended all the funds in the Friends of the Westminster PD account, but we do have the small negative balance that we need to resolve with the Community Foundation.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from Ms. Matthews on this one? Let me just say, this isn't so much a question, as I know that some time ago when we first heard about these these issues, that we decided that we thought it was better to have them managed internally, and so we directed staff to start taking steps to do that. But I don't think we ever got a clear picture on, I mean, I know there were some questions from some council members on what our ability was to be able to directly receive these kinds of contributions to the city and be able to appropriately handle them. And I don't want an answer right now, but perhaps Ms. Matthews, you and Ms. Levan could get together and provide us with an answer to that question so that everybody will be comfortable with that going forward.
Certainly, I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be great. Thank you. I think that would put some minds at rest. Are there any other questions on this item?
Mr. President.
Mr. Cavazzi.
Not so much a question, just a comment. We never want to have findings, obviously. We want to be clean every single time. But, it's a pretty sizable operation with a lot of line items, different budgets actually that all come together into one. And while it's, always the goal is to never have any, I do want to compliment Ms. Matthews and Ms. Palmer and the rest of the staff for addressing these. I feel like they did a pretty good job. They got on top of it pretty quickly. And I think, took action to rectify, the issues that were brought up. And it's why we do an audit, is to be able to review those things. And I know when I first got on the council, there were some audits that had significantly more findings than this. We've had some that have had less. We've had a few, I think a couple that have had none. But the bottom line is the key is we were able to get on top of it. And when I say we, I really mean staff was able to get on top of it and get these things corrected. And I'd just like to say thank you to them for that work, because I know that takes some effort to do that. That's it, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Cavazzi. Ms. Matthews, you want to wrap up the last few of these?
Certainly, and I'll try to move along. As the Mayor and Common Council are aware, the city operates a public housing authority, and as a recipient of federal funds, we are required, in addition to our customary audit, financial audit, to have what is referred to as a single audit, and that is basically triggered by our receipt of federal funds. So the next 3 findings, number 6, 7, and 8, basically are under the heading in your agenda packet as Federal Award Program Audit. So finding number 6 relates to the housing choice vouchers. The auditor's recommendation reads as follows: the City of Westminster should perform an analysis of administrative cost allocated across the funds to determine proper allocation for each type of cost. Once approved, these allocations should be distributed to the Finance Department and employees responsible for authorizing invoices. Authorizing signatures should be verified during the check signing or ACH process. The city's response was that the Finance Department will perform an analysis of administrative costs to determine proper allocations between funds by the end of the fiscal year. Amounts charged to the Housing Fund before the final analysis is performed will be assessed for reasonableness, and any corrections that are required will be performed by June 30th, 2020. Effective immediately, the Finance Department will ensure all invoices have authorizing signatures before they go to the check signers or the ACH transaction is completed. Are there any questions regarding that finding before I move on?
All right, please go ahead.
Okay. Finding 7, as I said, these are all related to the single audit. So the remaining findings all relate to the city's public housing authority and the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Finding 7 stated the City of Westminster should contact the depository to execute a HUD form and transfer the funds to an interest-bearing account. We commend management for addressing this finding as soon as it was brought to their attention. So the action taken is, it's obviously been resolved. The city executed a new general depository agreement on January 17, 2020, and the funds were put in an interest-bearing account at that time. And then the final finding, which is finding number 8, and I'll just go ahead, President Pecoraro, and read this. The recommendation from the auditors was each month a reconciliation needs to be performed between the Finance and Housing Department figures utilized for VMS reporting. If a reconciling item exists, it should be documented accordingly. Supporting documentation should be maintained for each filing submitted through VMS. If a correction occurs in a subsequent month after filing is complete, a prior month correction should be entered immediately into VMS. Since VMS requires corrections to be made in the month the voucher applies to and finance records are maintained on a cash basis, there will be reconciling items from time to time. At the end of the reporting year, a reconciliation should be performed to determine if any corrections were missed. The city's response to this finding was that finance provides housing with administrative costs at each month end, and housing will enter these costs into VMS. Starting with the March 2020 filing, housing will reconcile VMS to finance reports monthly. Housing will maintain documentation for reconciling items in a reconciling items file for audit purposes. VMS filings previously completed for fiscal year 1920 will be reconciled by the Housing Department and have supporting documentation produced. And that was the final entry in finding, as well as the city's response in the corrective action plan.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions on that one or on the entire audit report for Ms. Matthews? All right, hearing none. Ms. Matthews, thanks to you and the staff for taking the findings seriously, developing what sound to me like appropriate responses, and we will move on from there. And hopefully next year we will have covered these and we won't have missed anything else, and have a great audit next year. That's it for unfinished business, unless anybody knows of any of which I'm unaware. Under new business, there are no items unless anybody has anything of which I'm unaware. That will take us to departmental reports. Ms. Matthews.
Thank you, President Pecoraro. I'd like to first ask Councilmember Dayhoff whether he would like to provide any report on behalf of the Westminster Volunteer Fire Department.
No, thank you.
Okay. I just had two items I wanted to share, President Pecoraro. The first is that I think everyone is aware that Ms. Childs, our Director of Human Resources, will be retiring later this calendar year. I wanted to share with the Mayor and Common Council that the job announcements have started to be placed for the Director of Human Resources position. And for anyone listening, the position is open. The recruitment is open until the position is filled. Novak Consulting Group will be reviewing applications beginning July 31st. So we would encourage anyone who is interested in the position to try and get their application in by that date. As was alluded to earlier, and for the benefit of any community members watching, there will be a special Mayor and Common Council meeting on Monday, June 29th at 7:00 p.m. The meeting agenda includes a public hearing regarding the proposed issuance of up to $1,225,000 in bonds for possible improvements to the Westminster Municipal Pool, and adoption of ordinance number 924 regarding the same. I believe at the end of the meeting, President Pecoraro, you'll be providing everybody with information on how they can submit comments. And we do have some specific parameters regarding this public hearing. So those are available, and we will push out information this week about that, as well as what we had advertised in the Carroll County Times. Kind of just going through the individual departmental reports. I'll call on Ms. Childs, our Director of Human Resources, first.
Good evening. I have nothing new to report this evening.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Childs. Mr. Depo, our Director of Community Planning and Development.
Thank you. On June 10th, the Westminster Tree Commission discussed the upcoming or proposed urban and community forestry workshop and whether the workshop would be presented virtually due to COVID-19. So we're still looking at times and dates and when that might occur. Also, due to COVID-19, the city was unable to host the annual Arbor Day celebration this spring. So again, we're looking at possibly conducting a digital Arbor Day celebration or conducting an Arbor Day celebration during the 6-month Arbor Day anniversary, which is Saturday, October 24th, 2020. The Tree Commission also reviewed the comprehensive tree plan to provide any comments that they may have to improve the plan. And the Tree Commission also planted 4 trees for Arbor Week. 1 was on West Main Street and 3 were planted on Pennsylvania Avenue. On June 11th, the Planning Commission held its public hearing, and I'm happy to say that the Westminster Mission Barbecue was conditionally approved, and we're working on the final conditions so they can obtain their permits and begin construction. Also, the Big Lots located at 140 Village Shopping Center obtained approval for new signage, and also the site development plan for 7-Eleven. This is at 140 and Center Street. Also obtained conditional approval to redevelop the site with a new 7-Eleven convenience store structure and the addition of fuel pumps. As far as outdoor seating in the city, and Jeff can give an actual update on how many we've approved, but I believe it's been 5 restaurants have been approved for outdoor seating for sidewalks. We're also working with 4 restaurants outside of downtown that want to use parking spaces within shopping centers. And 2 of those I think are about to be approved, and 2 more we're just reviewing. And that completes my report.
Okay, next up will be our Director of Public Works, Mr. Glass.
I don't have any report this evening. Thank you.
Okay, Chief Ledwell.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So just to follow up on what Councilman Cavacci was touched on earlier with our annual awards, we did them individually via presentation due to the COVID-19 situation. And we also broadcast and did videotapings that are Westminster Police Department Facebook page. So of note, our Police Officer of the Year was Sergeant Timothy Rife, and it was for a cumulative effort of, as a new supervisor, the things that he's done in that role, his proactive productivity as a police officer, his involvement in additional duties such as crisis intervention team. He took on a coordinator role for that. He helped us work on a grant. He joined the county crisis negotiation team and was a participant in the resolution of several critical events and some other things that we thought cumulatively made him deserving of the Police Officer of the Year award. As far as our Civilian of the Year award went, Ms. Cheryl Pickett, who actually retired at the end of February after 30 years of service with the police department. She received multiple nominations from several of the dispatchers in our communications division who were extremely complimentary of the job she did in her role as communications specialist too. A variety of reasons she was selected as Civilian of the Year for 2019. We added a Rookie of the Year award, which we presented to Officer Alex DeAngelis. Officer DeAngelis had a number of accomplishments in his rookie year in 2019 as a police officer. He is our second canine handler at this time. He took on a host of additional responsibilities and was extremely proactive in addressing public safety issues, as well as putting in a lot of hours on foot and getting a lot of compliments on his professionalism, et cetera. So he was a recipient of that award. We give out 2 community partnership awards to 2 businesses in the community who have worked with us on public-private partnership in the interest of public safety. Those were awarded to Brook Owen Real Estate and to the Spa on West Main Street for their cooperative efforts with the police department in the area of public safety. We had several life-saving awards this year. Corporal Stallman and Detective Kinsey and PFC Spencer Volan and Officer Saltzman for potentially saving the lives of 2 individuals. They were awarded that, and we had several unit citations. We had an extremely productive year for our Criminal Investigations Bureau, and their rate of solving cases was extremely high, even though they were happened to be shorthanded during most of the year. They did an extremely good job with that. And then we had several commendations and other awards that we gave out. So if anyone should choose to view any of these awards or the presentation specifically, they are available if you have Facebook via the video on our page. So we did hold that. And on to some other categories. We did our second annual property and evidence inventory audit since we reorganized and utilizing the new software product. It went extremely well. We were very happy with it. On the 16th, we helped with the senior graduation parade involving both Westminster High School and Winters Mill High School students. It went off without a problem. I wanted to follow up. I know we discussed several months ago. There was a transition. They ended up transitioning the women's shelter, which was on Green Street, to their Stoner Avenue location. So I believe that was supposed to take place at the end of June, but ended up occurring on June the 8th. So that has happened. We had 2 sprees of thefts from auto, which is not unusual for this time of year. And in response to it, we are conducting some targeted patrols, but we've also blanketed the area with outreach flyers, and we posted on social media a reminder to lock vehicles and to secure valuables out of sight. I also want to note, in reference to the social justice issues and things we're seeing nationwide, we have collectively within the county, the law enforcement leaders, we formed 2 groups. One is a use of force policy and training curriculum best practices group, which I'm coordinating. And then there's a second group in place to explore potential use of the body-worn cameras and how we as county leaders can collectively look at that issue and the feasibility of staffing, et cetera. So when we're looking at the group that I'm involved in, there's several best practice resources that are out there that when in particular we're looking at our use of force policy and our training, I was pleased to note that we met each of the components that are recommended, but I think there's always the ability, and we should always be looking to make improvements and make sure that the wording's as clear as possible, that we're being as proactive as possible. So we've decided to collectively as a group make sure that we're all doing what we can to be introspective and to make sure that we're in line with best practices as well as practices moving forward. Potential changes to the law, either at a state level or nationally. So we did form those 2 committees to explore that, and that's underway. I believe I touched on everything. That's it.
Thank you, Chief Ledwell. Are there any questions for the chief?
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. Dayhoff? Mr. Dayhoff.
Chief, the award ceremonies were just simply excellent. I wonder if it'd be okay with you if we incorporated your prepared remarks into the minutes by reference. I think it'd be really important for not only citizens to know about the awards more, but also for the historians.
Sure, I'm fine with that.
All right,
Okay,
thank you. Without objection, it's so ordered.
Good, thank you.
Chief, if you'll share those with Ms. Visconski, that'll suffice.
Thank you.
And Mr. Zahel, while you're talking, did you have anything for the fire department?
No, I think we're good. We're awfully busy, and things, of course, are fairly complicated these days, but we're holding our own. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right. So that's
Ms.
oh, sorry, do we miss
I think
somebody?
we have two more departments. Ms. Palmer, our
I
Director of
apologize,
Finance and
Jack.
Administrative Services.
Yes, I just would like to thank the mayor and council for their understanding for the findings. I would like to explain that some of the findings that you saw during this audit were not as a result of a change of operations or something differently that we did. It just so happens that we have an audit team that's more comprehensive and a little stricter, and we welcome that. And just like the chief, we look forward to keeping up with all of the current standards and making sure that we're doing the best that we can for the city. I'd like to also thank all the directors and their supporting staff for helping us out in what was a challenging year. As most of you know, we lost about half of our staff either to retirements or for other various reasons, and right at year end, and I appreciate everybody's cooperation. Having said that, we are 8 days out from year end again, and I would very much appreciate everyone's cooperation for the next audit. That's all I have, Ms. Matthews.
Thank you. And then last but certainly not least, our Director of Housing Services, Ms. Valancisi.
Hi, can you?
Oops. I think you might have been muted, Ms. Valancisi. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yes, I just wanted to share the letter that I did receive from the Public Housing Office, and that is just to let us know that it says, Dear Ms. Valancisi, the subject is the 5-year PHA plan, and this letter is to inform you that the City of Westminster Housing Office 5-year PHA plan submission for the PHA fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 is approved. This approval of the 5-year plan does not constitute an endorsement of the strategies and policies outlined in the plan. In providing assistance to families under programs covered by this plan, the City of Westminster Housing Office will comply with the rules, standards, and policies established in its plan, as provided in the 24 CFR Part 903 and other applicable regulations. Your approved plan and all required attachments and documents must be made available for review and inspection at the principal office of the PHA during normal business hours. My staff extends its appreciation to you on the quality of your PHA plan submission. All required components of the plan applicable to your authority have been addressed completely, enabling HUD to fulfill its review responsibilities relative to the PHA with fiscal years beginning July 1st, 2020. And that's from Laurel Davis, Division Director of the Public Housing, Baltimore. Just wanted to give you that piece of information. That's good news. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Valancisi, and congratulations to you and your staff on having the plan accepted by HUD. President Pecoraro, before I turn it back to you, as I mentioned in my remarks, that there will be a public hearing next Monday night regarding the proposed issuance of bonds for improvements at the pool. This information was included in the required notice that appeared in the Carroll County Times, but with your concurrence, this is slightly different because there are certain state requirements. So I'd like to just sort of highlight what folks need to do who either want to actually testify during that hearing or actually just listen in. There have been some requirements from the state trying to adapt to the virtual meeting format. So comments will still be sent to comments@westgov.com. Anyone who actually wants to listen in on the meeting and does not have access to Facebook should send a note to Ms. Sosowski, once again at comments@westgov.com, no later than 4:30 p.m. on Friday, June 26th. And we are asking in the subject line that they would note CDA loan public hearing - listen only. Those who actually want to provide testimony should send Note to Ms. Sosowski at comments@westgov.com, once again, no later than 4:30 p.m. on Friday, June 26th. In their email, they should indicate that they wish to speak during the public hearing and provide their name, address, and the phone number they wish to use to dial in, so that Ms. Sosowski can kind of keep an eye out on those who actually do wish to testify as part of the Zoom meeting. They should reference in the subject line of their email, speak during CDA loan public hearing, which will help Ms. Sosowski kind of flag that for her so she knows that there is someone that she will need to provide dial-in instructions to. And with that, that concludes staff's reports. Certainly any of us would be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any additional questions for Ms. Matthews or her staff? All right, hearing none, we will move on to the last part of our agenda, excuse me, which is citizens' comments. This is the time when we normally invite the public to address the mayor and council on any issues that pertain to tonight's agenda or any other city issues. During the midst of the pandemic and the lack of our ability to meet in person, and as we conduct these virtual electronic meetings, we are inviting the public to share their comments by emailing them to our city clerk at comments@westgov.com. And during that time, I will read out the comments we have received at every meeting. We hope people will take advantage of this opportunity. The mayor and council strongly believe that it's important to preserve these important hallmarks of civil government throughout the emergency. And so we have two comments tonight, which I would like to read. One is from Kelly Hamilton of 58 Pennsylvania Avenue, Unit B. I appreciate what you are doing with the budget. However, there needs to be a voice for the homeless, vets, low-income families. Why would you not put in for grants for them? Our shelters are falling apart with older buildings used to cram a lot more people in. If the police come around, they destroy the tents and clothes given by human services programs. About the vets, there was federal money that was discovered and wasn't used for them. Then there is low-income families struggling, especially if both parents have to work and there isn't enough money left over for a babysitter. Let us think about the less fortunate and be able to fit them in the budget. The next comments are from Donna Robinson of 33 Cypress Point Court. I would like to thank the employees that responded so quickly to my report of trash, furniture dumped and a cut fence in the stormwater management pond located on Tahoma Farm Road and Firestone Drive. Our community, Eagleview Estates, greatly appreciates all of the work you do in keeping these areas clean and maintained. Stay safe. Thank you. And thanks to both of you for your comments. And again, we welcome comments for future meetings. And of course, especially for the special meeting next week, where we will have some slightly different procedures involved in doing that. And that concludes our regular agenda for the evening, and also the meeting itself. So without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming tonight.